Beautiful. So, introduction, short summary, all the maths, those tables, and then at the end, discussion, which is a lot of the talking, there's a fair bit of writing in this, conclusion, and then your appendix, which will involve pictures of your car, etc.
Oh, I put that in the introduction. Is that okay?
No. So in the discussion that's talking about every table that you did?
Yeah, so discussion will be where we talk about the maths. Generally, I want the folio to flow, and if you've printed out lots of print screens from carsales.com, from RAA and banks, then the folio gets broken up by lots of different of these sheets. So I'd rather they just got stuck in the appendix and you refer to them within the folio. Talia?
With the math section, do we have to draw the tables? Can we do them?
You can do them on the computer, that's fine.
Fine.
If you've drawn them, that's fine. If you need to scan them or photocopy them off the sheet I've given you, then that's fine as well.
In the math bit, is there no right and out? It's just those tables?
So the tables need to be clearly labelled. So they need to have table 1, except table 1 and then a title for it, and each of the headings on the table need to be labelled like they are in there. Yeah. But you don't need to write and explain about them, no.
So we don't have to say table 1 shows like the increase in the payments by $50 or anything?
You will have to say that, but in the discussion. No. That should be evident from looking at the table. People can see the payments going up. Etc., followed by references. References. Alright. So, actual discussion points. The whole folio is centered around the big question of what sort of loan is best for you and how can you minimize your loan repayments realistically. So that's essentially what we're looking to answer. Now, when you talk about it, it needs to be done in third person. So you can't say, this loan is the best for me, or I think this is the best loan for me. It all needs to be said in third person, which I know is tricky, but you can use sentences like, this is the best loan for a student just leaving school looking for their first car. Or you can talk about it in generalities. In general terms, not personally, alright? And that's what the rest of the folio is essentially centered on. So to start off with, in your discussion, you can talk about what's the price of the car and what's the total cost of buying it. Now that sounds like a strange question because you all think, well, if my car costs $20,000, then that's the price of it, right? The price and the cost are the same. But it's not quite the case, because even if the price of your car is $20,000, there is still stamp duty, registration, and so on that adds on to that $20,000. So if the price is $20,000, the cost to you of buying it might well be closer to 21 and a half. Alright? And that leads to the question of why did you choose to borrow the amount you did? So if the price of your car is $20,000, are you choosing to borrow $20,000 and have personal savings to cover the rest, or do you need to borrow all $21,000, etc.? And you need to show some research here in a stamp duty and registration. So to show some awareness of the other costs of buying a car. And those research bits can go in the appendix, but they need to be mentioned and talked about in the discussion. Alright. Now, you're asked to look at 2 different loans. So in the discussion, you'll need to explain the different loans and what are their pros and cons, and why was one loan chosen over the other. So in your tables, you'll have chosen one loan and done all the maths on that one loan. Why did you choose that one and not the other one? It might be because it had a lower interest rate, it might be because it had lower fees, it might be because it's more convenient because it was of the bank you're with already. But there needs to be a reason you chose it. Please don't say you flipped a coin. Okay? Now, we're looking for awareness of the costs of running the car. And that will lead into which loan to choose. Because if you've all done the tables, you'll know that if you took out a loan for 2 years or 1 year, then the interest you pay in total is quite low. However, the monthly repayments are high. And when you go to buy a car for real, if you are taking out loans, then you'll need to try and budget how much will it cost in monthly repayments each month and how much can you afford. If you take out a really long loan, then the monthly repayments are very small, but you end up paying a lot more interest. So in general, you try to minimise it as much as possible. However, the shorter the loan term, the more you have to pay each month. And if it's a really short loan term, you won't be able to afford the monthly payments. So somewhere in there is a medium balance between a really long, expensive loan, a short, cheap loan that you have to pay a lot each month. Right? And part of paying each month, you also have to think about the other costs of running a car. So other costs of running a car will take a bit of research, but the ongoing costs of cars include fuel, insurance, maintenance, tyres, registration, and you'll have to think a little about what sort of insurance, what sort of registration, that should be quite simple, and then how much you're going to use the car. This is where you'll have to estimate a little and justify your estimate. So you might only be driving 100 kilometres a week, or you might be driving 3 or 4 times that. And based on that, you'll be able to work out how much fuel you'll need on average and how often you'll go through your tyres. In general, accountants estimate that it costs people between $80 and $100 per week to run a car. If you add all those things up, it'll come to around $80 bucks a week. So think $360 a month already. That's before you start paying the interest on the loan. Around. But you can do the math depending on how you run your car or motorbike and see how it works out. Alright? So that's just essentially you guys showing some appreciation of all the costs involved in running a car. And therefore, how much can you afford to take out a loan for the monthly repayments? Yeah, cars are scarily expensive. Alright, and then the actual discussion about the maths you've done. So this is where you discuss the tables, and you need to refer to the tables. So table 1 showed this. What is the effect of a higher or lower interest rate? So what happens if we go for a higher interest rate, what happens if we go for a lower one? And that was shown in the tables. And by effect I mean, what is the total effect on your total repayments? So will it cost you more or less overall if you have a higher or lower interest rate? Similarly, will it cost you more or less overall if you have a longer or shorter loan period? Alright, and these are the really important discussion points because this is actually discussing the maths you've done. So you need to be able to interpret those tables you've gone through. It'd also be worth mentioning any assumptions you've made here. So one assumption might be if you have taken out a loan that's variable interest rate, it means actually that interest rate can vary. It might not stay 5.2% or whatever it is at the moment for the entire time. It'll vary over the 3 or 4 year loan period you have taken it out for. So what you're assuming to doing these calculations is that it's going to stay at 5.2, but that might not be entirely the case. Right. Now, also talking about the other tables, what's the effect of increasing the monthly repayment? So this is where we went through that table and you guys increased the payment by $50 each month. What was the total effect that it had on the repayments? So did it increase the total you had to pay at the end or decrease the total you had to pay at the end? Most of you will have found the more you pay each month, the less you have to pay overall, which is cool, but again there's a balance because you might not be able to afford that much each month, and that's a limitation. So the limitation is perhaps that's not affordable each month. And the other thing to think about, again you don't necessarily have to, is are any variations possible? So for example, if you take out a loan for 5 years and can't afford extra payments at the start, there's a good chance within those 5 years you'll start earning more money. You'll have a pay rise, get a better job, etc. And then you might be able to afford the higher repayments. So is it worth starting paying higher amounts halfway through the loan? Now that isn't shown in your table, but that sort of discussion is the higher level of A-level discussion. Alright. The other table is the effect of paying more often. So what is the effect of paying weekly or fortnightly as opposed to the normal monthly repayments? How does that change the total amount we owe at the end? Other things you might want to talk about, just throwing suggestions out there, is what's the difference between the fixed and variable interest rate and what sort of loan is yours? It should say in the fine print. What are the advantages, disadvantages of a personal loan or a secured loan? Essentially, a personal loan is where you just ask the bank to borrow money and say, fantastic, can I borrow some money? And I'll give it to you. A secured loan is you go to the bank and say, I'm going to buy a car. Can I have a loan for this car? If I don't repay the loan, you can take the car. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of either? What about the advantages and disadvantages of taking out a loan at all against paying cash? So is it perhaps worth saving for a couple of years and buying the car in cash? What are the advantages and disadvantages of that? Or is it taking out the loan now and then paying loan repayments for the next couple of years?
Can you put this all in a Word document and then put on the copy afterwards?
Can we just copy it now? We have time.
I'm recording it. Can I just put it on YouTube? No? Too hard? Alright, I will copy it to the common drive then.
Well, can we just copy it now? Like once you finish reading it, can we go to the beginning and then oh.
We can do all three, can't we?
Yeah.
Suppose we do it.
Alright, so when I finish going through it, I'll copy it to a Word document, stick it on the common drive. I'll scroll at the top to let you go through it, and then the rest of you can keep going with the quiz/start writing this. And in fact, that takes us actually to the end. I'm back to the summary bit. Yes, Carla?
Can I read out two people, please?
Sure. Any folio-related questions? So, are you all happy with how it's going to look? Short introduction of the sort of car, type of loan, and then a quick preview of what's coming up. So, effect of different loan payments, advantages, disadvantages. Then all the maths, those tables. The discussion, which is all that stuff above. Again, you probably wouldn't need all of it, but I would advise all of it or more if you want a really good grade. Huh?
Is there a word limit?
No, there's no word limit, but one of the words in your marking matrix that I mark you on is clear and concise. Do you want to know what concise means? Concise means short. So, there aren't mega marks for typing for pages and pages. It's more about what you say rather than how long it takes you to say it. So make it nice and clear and easy to follow. And then your conclusion is answering the big question. So what sort of loan is best for a student just leaving school, and how might they reduce their payments? And that appendix is all the research you've done and references. Alright, I will copy this now to a Word document.